Hi, everyone. Super excited to kick off this week's Flockjay LinkedIn Live event for Shadow Enablement for the win. Here with Nieka Mamczak, who is the Senior Manager of Enablement for CS at Stack Overflow. Don't want to get too ahead here, but super excited for the opportunity that we have to meet with her, pick her brain, and really understand how shadow enablement is being leveraged at companies. With all that being said, a few housekeeping items. This event, as always, is being recorded. So if you're not able to join this one, please feel free to watch, review, listen. This one's going to be a good one. Nieka and I might go off on a few tangents here. More to come on that later. As always, if there's any questions, comments from the team, please drop them in. Would love to hear your thoughts. All that being said, would love to introduce Nieka Mamczak, who I've previously mentioned. She is the Senior Manager of Enablement CS at Stack Overflow. Her background is awesome, especially as you look at all of the things that she's done previously. And just to highlight some of the few, she's led enablement at some pretty awesome companies. Previously worked at IBM in a worldwide function of enablement. Prior to that, how it all started. She's going to give us more context to it, but she's also been a rep. She knows what it's like to be in the trenches, what it takes day in and day out to be successful, and has since kind of transitioned over the last 8 years into the role of enablement and really figuring out how to put those puzzle pieces together to make sure reps are more effective in their day to day. So super excited to get things kicked off. I am Michael Depallens. I have the fun job of hosting this awesome event. And of course, excited to be here. Let's kick things off. So, Nieka, thank you so much for being here with us. Would love to know how. Let's just kick things off with the first question here. How did you get into sales enablement?
Thanks, Michael. And hello, everybody. Super excited to be here. I started my official title in sales enablement about 6 years ago. Having been in sales for a long time, as already mentioned briefly by Michael, I do feel like I indirectly have been part of enablement for quite some time. I started off as an SDR quite some time ago. I quickly graduated to being a team lead of SDRs and then changed roles into becoming a leader of SDR teams, then changed over to working more in the bottom of the funnel as an AE, then becoming a director of sales. And I was at a small startup that was acquired by IBM in 2016. I represented a product that was a video streaming solution that was very unique and new and rare for the IBM cloud portfolio sellers to be selling. So as my role evolved as being an IBMer, I was asked to literally travel all around the world to train tens of thousands of IBM sellers, because there's a lot of them out there, on what this product could do, how to speak about it, how to prospect to it, how to identify the right personas, do discovery, etc. I knew within the first couple of months of doing that I had found where my new home was going to be. So much so that after 3 months of traveling and training, I remember very specifically one of our leaders in our business unit, our cloud video business unit at IBM, came to me, and we were in Singapore, super exciting. We were in Singapore and I had just conducted a training session, and he's like, you're pretty good at this training stuff. I was like, yeah, I really like it. And he said, did you think you want to change your role? You've been leading a small sales team, but would you be interested in helping us lead the charge in building out our enablement function for this product? We could really use your help. I was like, wow, that's a no-brainer. I said yes on the spot. And so ever since then, I think I've really found my calling, which is my love for sales coupled with my love for helping people. So fast forward to today, I've been at 3 other organizations since IBM. My strength is in building enablement programs, but I also know how to step into existing enablement programs. But here I am today talking about all great things enablement, and I like to also focus on the people first portion of enablement. versus the process first portion of enablement. So yeah, that's my story.
Where do we even start? So let's even before we get into the next thing, let's talk about this. How, by the way, background is just impressive as always. But I really love the fact that you try and couple these two things together of like the people process performance. How do you do that? Like in your current environment, and how do you make sure that people are always at the forefront of everything that you do in enablement?
Yeah, I think I remember very specifically being on the receiving end of process driven training and realizing that it wasn't for me. And then looking around to my peers and realizing, well, it's not for anyone really. You have to have process associated to what you do with enablement. But I think in overall, what enablement is serving is a group of people, right? So I always like to refer to enablement as a business within a business. And we have customers, and our customers are the sellers and the customer success team members and anyone that we're serving. So I think if you have that people first attitude, what you are going to be driven towards is building and creating, producing and delivering and measuring what people can do with all the great resources that you can create. You can create a lot of great content, you can use a lot of great solutions, but can you really reach a person? That's where I really gravitate to as my people first approach, to make sure that I literally want to, I don't do this anymore, but I want to step into a room and I want to make sure that everyone remembers me when I step out of the room. I want to make sure that if I'm engaging with people, that they are not multitasking. So in order for me to do that, I have to think about, who am I addressing? I'm addressing people. Content is the byproduct. People are the focus.
And I think this is a amazing segue into our question here of like of reps enabling themselves, especially as they get from, just the process driven, here's the top down approach. But how do you see reps enabling themselves inside of organizations, and what do you do with that?
Well, I can remember back to the days when I was an SDR, and it was long before all these great automated technologies existed. We literally had a SIP soft phone and a spreadsheet. And we had to get very creative and innovative in building efficiencies to being productive, right? So I think that back then, I remember very specifically working in a call center, and the buzz around the call center was celebrating successes of when a person literally hung up and you're like, oh, you caught somebody live and they want to have a meeting? You got a lead? Oh my goodness, how did you do that? So I think it's always been inherent amongst all of us as humans that we, by nature, do gravitate to communicating with each other. And we do also gravitate to finding a way to make things work for ourselves. So I think if you fast forward to today, a lot of things have changed. The technology that we use has changed. But one thing that's still true is we're still humans and we still gravitate to helping each other and helping ourselves. So some of the more current ways that I see reps enabling themselves is, I think it's really helpful to give a variety of types of content. Some people like to learn by reading, some people like to learn by watching, some people like to learn by doing. If you can provide a variety of mediums for people to have in their arsenal and their repository to learn from, you're going to notice trends in what people are going to do with that information. So, for example, if you think about presentation decks that sellers use, it is more common than not that a seller is going to take the initial presentation deck and put their brand on it, as they should, because they're the face of representing that content, right? And so I think that those are, if you allow for that open forum, give a variety of types of resources, and allow humans and people to develop their own personal brand, they are then going to feel open and free to be able to take the information that you're giving to them and customize it and market for themselves so that they can truly represent it. And I feel that if you don't provide that opportunity, what you will have is a bunch of robots speaking robotically to other people who will sense right away that they are not being treated like a human from a human, and you're not going to have as best of results. So I think just variety of resources, opening up creativity and flexibility, that I've seen work really well for reps of a variety of types of roles, right? So it's got to start with top of the funnel. You have to do this with everyone, One thing I also want to point out is it's not a one size fits all, and it also should be available to all people that are customer facing. So sometimes I've noticed that it's really the focus of the AE role specifically, but a rep is a rep, and everyone who is customer facing should be regarded in that way as well, so that you are opening up this opportunity for everyone from SDR to AE to everyone on the post sale side.
And you bring up a really good point. I just want to touch on something that you mentioned before is like meeting reps where they're at with the content that you're providing, right? I think over the last few years, this has been accelerated because we're constantly trying to find new mediums to engage reps where they're at. Given the fact that we've got these hybrid remote work environments, people need access to the information. There's no longer this tap someone on the shoulder and say, "Hey, what are you doing to be successful?" And totally hear you on that other part where it's like, let's not just give people the static, here's the script, go read it, you'll be successful. Long gone are the days where people want to hear like the quick pitch about, here's what we do, how we do it. It's like, yeah, that's still important, but what is the human element that you bring on the call? Because you can still be reading off that same piece of information. Now the next question is like, okay, when we do have reps enabling themselves, and when we do have them doing things more ad hoc, copy of a presentation, I've never seen that happen. What do you do? How do you control that?
Oh, that's a good question. That's always the concern from, our cross-functional partners like marketing, who very much have, put their stamp of approval on content and forbid you to share stuff that's like internal only and really enforce you to like use the exact deck and presentation. Um, I think the most important thing there on this topic is continued visibility. Now,
Mm.
let's be clear. There will always be, I see it all the time, there will always be that person that takes the forbidden screenshot of something and sneaks it like under the door to somebody to be like, look at what I found. But overall, I think that if you are just serving information for people to learn on their own, not checking in if they have actually learned it or adopted it to themselves, and not checking in again afterwards to see if it even worked, what you run the risk of is more of that secrecy of people trying to go off and do things on their own. What I've seen to work really well is celebrating the success and sometimes the failures of what people have started to use right out in the field. If you are not constantly touching base to see, did that messaging work? Oh, it didn't work. Let's talk about it. Oh, the messaging worked. Let's talk about it. I think the more you can provide an open, safe forum for communication, the more likely you are to enable the reps to want to more enable themselves and each other. If you don't keep that open forum and you keep it more of like one and done and a one to many top down kind of mandate, you're not going to provide that safety and comfort for everyone to want to collaborate, learn, and share from each other. So, what I like to do a lot is celebrate success. And by the way, success does not mean I closed a deal. That's the obvious, right? Success could mean I finally got the person on the phone. How did you do that? Success can mean I finally figured out that I don't need to use all 25 slides of this presentation deck. Oh my goodness, how did you do that? I finally realized that being rejected is okay. Good. That is very successful too. So I think the constant open community that you can provide as an enablement professional really allows people to feel comfortable and confident in sharing. And then what happens organically is that they hear from their peers. So that goes with reps enabling themselves and with each other. A lot of times what I've seen in the past is reps will do their own thing in their own world, and they'll keep stuff on their own hard drive or in their own drive, and then we never know what the good secrets are. If you allow for this open forum for sharing and collaboration more often, you're going to see people, first of all, perk up. They're going to want to share and communicate with each other, and then they're collecting along the way additional ideas that they can use.
Yeah, and that, hope everyone who's watching takes away that one piece is it's okay, but you need to have a healthy way of measuring to make sure that there's some type of controls on it. And not to say that content can get overbearing or can get a little sporadic at times, but what's more important is this idea of, look, let's learn from each other, the people who are doing it day in and day out. Let's learn what they're doing in the field, because oftentimes they're the ones who know what the rejection is. They know who the competitor that they're coming up against, 9 times out of 10. And if they don't, let's help them. Let's help teach them. Let's help train them on those things. I think another thing that's really interesting is you almost eliminate the trial and error phase of reps, right? Not necessarily completely, but you control it more. So instead of them having to go through 50 different experiments, right? 50 different at bats, they've now condensed it down into 10 or 5, right? Because you've given this the ability to learn from their peers. And I think that kind of leads us really well into the next question, which we're going to go on a tangent on this one. Sorry, everybody. But how do you instill peer-to-peer learning as well as manager-led training in the same environment?
Yeah, so I think that the best way to do this is from the onset of employment. So this is not something that you wait for someone to become like a senior rep to be able to do. I think it's already too late. Especially nowadays that we are digital first, we are less involved in a community in general. I think it is most successful to establish that as a culture of learning and a culture of peer collaboration from onboarding on. So, numerous times already, most recently in my career, what I've started to do is build out onboarding programs that establish this peer learning right out of the gate. So, you can identify your onboarding SMEs that are just perfected in one specific area so they don't have to like spread themselves too thin, but then you introduce them as the face of the brand of this one thing that they do really well, and then everyone coming in the door as a new hire gets to meet somebody new, right? Because if you didn't have that layout, most likely they would not have interacted, especially if they're not in the same role. But then also it just opens up the door right away for that as the way we're going to learn. We're going to learn from each other, and we're going to learn from a variety of places. And I think that I've seen that to work very successful for a variety of reasons. One, again, it bridges the gap with the fact that we don't really collaborate a lot nowadays amongst our peers or even within the organization. It gives someone the opportunity to think about how they can navigate the organization and upskill themselves as well to want to do that eventually for themselves. And it provides a variety and diversity that we all covet and want. We want to be able to have a variety of ways to learn, as I was talking about earlier with resources. The same holds true for when you learn from peers. I specifically learn a variety of different nuggets from different types of people based on what I know their strengths are, but I also know based on how they present information to me. I never go to the same person more than once for a variety of different ways to learn. And I think that that's what we gravitate to again. Just think about this, the common thing of shopping on Amazon. We look for peer influencers, the common, looking on Netflix. We look at what other people have watched. But we want that variety, right? So if you instill that peer-to-peer learning with the variety of faces, the variety of styles, you do it at the onset of onboarding and then you continue it over time, right? So let's be clear, this is not just an onboarding thing. It's really helpful to have your subject matter expert pool be broad. I like to think about employees in an organization in three primary buckets. There's your onboarding employee, they're getting to know the organization and their role. There's what I did not coin this term, but I like using it, the everboarding bucket, which is learning evergreen material. That's another pool of SMEs that could be there, peer-to-peer learning. And then there's your upboarding bucket. So it's an unsung hero, I think, in the whole entire process, but there is an ability for us to learn from other peers. How did you get to that next level? There are people that have asked me because I'm advancing in my own career as an enablement professional. Well, how did you get started? And, what are the steps that you took? And I love talking about that, but I also love asking others how they did that as well. So I think if you, again, in summary, establish that early on and then address it in all the key areas that you're providing training, then it becomes mainstream as part of your offering.
Should we just stop now? I mean, that I hope everyone is understanding. Like that takes the cake. I mean, you touched on some of the most important pieces, and where we've seen a lot of reps fail is like, look, onboarding can be really, really, intensive, but if you're not enabling them to go learn from other people who are in the role today from those SMEs or SMEs, as we like to call them, it's really hard for you to get your grasp once you're in that everboarding phase because Now all of a sudden you're not seeing the same success. You're now in the day-to-day job. It's like, okay, who do I go tap to for this or for that, right? But even like let's go through that a little bit further. It's like, okay, we've identified who the SMEs are. Like when you talk really broad and specific at the same time, what are some examples of SMEs that you have that you use on the onboarding phase, and do you use them in the everboarding phase as well?
That's a great question. I think it depends on a few variable components. The size of your organization is a huge factor, right? The maturity of the organization and the people available. Specifically, if you're a newer organization, you might want to start small and you might want to start with your onboarding bucket first, just for the sheer fact that there's not a lot of evergreen material established
Yeah.
yet. So it's volume, it's maturity of organization, it's how you develop this process. And I will say that it's in your best interest to consider taking a phased approach. So you can't expect to do all the boarding buckets at once. You should not expect to do that because that's not manageable, nor is that realistic. So I would just say, depending on where your organization is at and what's available to you, if you are hiring pretty regularly, start with your onboarding bucket because those are the people that you can mature and move on to the everboarding and upboarding buckets over time. Those will be the people that will graduate to a different level of content. So I think tapping into your onboarding subject matter experts is a good first pass for this peer-to-peer learning. I think the other thing that's super important about tapping into the onboarding bucket first is because managers have been around for a while for the most part as either a manager at the organization or within the organization and promoted as a manager. They are so far removed from onboarding as a rep that they are not the most viable person to talk about the stuff that's in the weeds.
Mm.
So I would say, again, that's another really realistic reason to focus on the onboarding bucket first. If you are doing a lot of initiatives that are goal oriented to bigger organizational goals for your everboarding bucket, that could be the way that you prioritize then what you do with subject matter experts for everboarding. You can't just force it and just say, like, every time we're going to do a training, we're always going to have a SME. Again, it's not just this splatter across, right? You have to be very thoughtful about how you place your peer-to-peer trainers. But when you have very specific company initiatives, if they're brand new, that's not really where you're going to tap into your SME pool because everyone's learning something out of the gate. If it's content that's evergreen, like for example, your competitors or like how to progress deals in the sales stages, those are just other variable components to think about. How mature is the content that you need to present, and does it warrant a peer-to-peer interaction? If it's new content, it's really not a good idea to bring your SME pool in because they haven't learned it yet either. So I know that was like a broad stroke on the concept, but I think that it should be a phased approach. It should be based on certain initiatives that your company is going through, and it should be based on what is the availability and life cycle of the content that you need to represent. And that's where you can sort of piece this journey together.
Yeah. The question that always comes up though, especially for enablement people, is like the resourcing capabilities, right? Like,
Yep.
okay, we've got onboarding, we've got everboarding, we've got this upboarding, you've got these three buckets, you've got also the internal priorities, and then you've got the litany of tasks that are being thrown your way from teams that are like, hey, how do I prioritize? Like, how if you're going to use peer-to-peer learning and manager-led training effectively, like how do you resource yourself if you're a small and mighty team?
Yeah. So I've been a small and mighty team of one before, serving hundreds of people. So let's be clear. I totally understand and empathize what you just said. This is all the more reason why it's really in your best interest, especially if you're a small team, that you do broaden the scope of what enablement is in your organization. No matter where you are, even if you have hundreds of enablers around you, enablement is never just by title, right?
Mm, yep.
Everyone in the organization can help with enablement. So if you establish that criteria early on, I think that it's more acknowledged and respected. It shouldn't just be that you're dumping all these responsibilities on one person who's going to like pull their hair out, right? Be mindful of how you use your subject matter experts, because what you also don't want to do is say, I can't do my job, so I'm going to give it all to everybody else. So you have to be very specific in why you want this peer-to-peer training to occur. Let's be clear. I have been in enablement for 6 years. That does not mean that I have been actively selling or prospecting in over 6 years. Am I the best person to teach the new SDR or AE on prospecting? No. Is it the person that does it every day? Yes. So this is why this peer-to-peer training is super important, because you get validation from peers immediately of like, I know this is to be true because I just experienced this 12 hours ago, and let me show you and tell you what just happened, right? So the validation of the peer influence has to be associated to what you want them to do. It can't just be associated to, I can't do my job by myself, I need all this help. The last thing I'll say on this topic that I think is super important is no matter what you do with enablement, and especially as it relates to peer-to-peer learning, don't forget to map it back to results and metrics, because you can't just now slap on a new training type of program without showing where this is going. So for onboarding, for example, if you're initiating a peer-to-peer learning for onboarding of new hires, what you should be thinking about is this reducing ramp time? That's a mouthful. Is
Yeah.
this increasing rep productivity in a smaller period of time? Is this helping reps to, get to learn their job better? You have to prove that, right? Otherwise, you are just using a bunch of other people to not necessarily get to a goal. So everything that you do as it relates to this category should also be associated to very big goals that you have in mind, so that you can show first to the reps, why are we here? Why are we doing this? This is the goal. If you don't show the goal, they kind of just dismiss it as like this one-time learning event and they don't really need to use it. If you establish the goals, you confirm the goals, you map them to company goals, and you show the goals, and then you celebrate how have we achieved the goals, I think that gets better buy-in from everyone involved.
Yeah. That topic though is very, that right there is training in a nutshell. Is we're very
Yeah.
good at like the how, not necessarily on why things are important for some reps, and especially when you talk about like enabling the SMEs, like that is so crucial to ensuring that one, the people who are being onboarding have access to who's actually on the front lines today, but then also enabling the team for success in the future based off of the fact that, hey, look, they know who the experts are. They know that they can come to you. However, they've now got, this SME on this topic that's very specific. And so you've almost taken yourself out of the equation in terms of who they go to ask the questions to. And they're now going directly to that SME so that you don't have to play the game of telephone, which is amazing. And I think the segue into like, how do you report? Like, this is perfect timing, is how do you report on the success of your enablement efforts, especially if you've got some of these larger goals internally? Like, what do you do?
Well, I can tell you what I didn't do at first, and I will tell you all how I learned the hard way so you can remember lessons learned from me. What I did initially in my first enablement journey was assume that I was Wonder Woman and I could help everyone with all the things. And what I started to do was everything. And I started to do a lot of tactical tasks. And what I didn't do was wrap them around anything that was big, nor did I produce any sort of reporting for myself. And shame on me, I should know this because I was an AE and I was a director of sales, and I knew that everything that the sales persona does reflects in like a Salesforce report, and there's like numbers and dashboards. So I got too like spread thin, and I just wanted to save the world. And so what you can't do is assume that you can save the world. What you can do though is you can find the things that move a needle. And it's not a lot, and it's not a little, but it's got to be something that you can reconfirm with sales leadership, with CS leadership, with a revenue leadership organization. Find what your company goals are as it associates to revenue targets, and back into the programs that you're going to work on, and make sure that you are mapping to company goals, because then otherwise what's going to happen is you'll get stretched thin and you're going to go and accommodate all the random ad hoc requests for help, because eventually you're going to have this like savior persona established where it's like, oh, can you help me log into my account again? Sure, I can help you. No, I can't help you do that because that's not associated to the goals that we're doing. So I say all that to say reporting on enablement is more important than ever before. Our enablement just profession has hockey sticked, right? There's a lot of visibility and awareness in enablement. Lots of organizations are hiring for these roles, investing in technology for this kind of function. Make sure that everything that you do is with purpose for yourself first so that you don't burn out, but more importantly, for the success that you can celebrate within the organization. And so, a couple of examples that I'll give is that a lot of times I like to lead with the why are we here and the with them for you kind of slide for sellers and CS people. Because if you don't show them the why and the with them, then again, they just regard it as like a one time event, something I'm going to learn and kind of like randomly pay attention to. But there's no attribution to like a meaningful thing for me in the company to be able to help achieve goals. So you've got to be able to establish what those goals and metrics are. You've got to furnish them regularly in the trainings that you run, and you have to be sure to collect results. And now collecting results is the hardest part. So you have to be really careful on what you expect to be able to report. You have to be cautious on what you claim you are able to do. There are certain things that you can't claim you can be able to do. You can influence revenue as an enablement person. There is no direct correlation that you can say for sure 100% the enablement programs I ran, as a result, we 100% reached our quota this quarter. That would be a very, like, if you've done that out there, please tell me. I want to know how you prove that. But otherwise, hopefully you get to the point. Is report on what you know is tangible, what you know is a result of programs that you can furnish. So lead with the goal when you develop a training program. Make sure everyone is aware of why we're doing what we're doing. It's because we're trying to achieve something as a company. We don't always present training that way. It's more of like isolated, single, like AEs need to learn about better discovery questions. Why? It's because we want to beat the competition so that we ask better questions at the beginning to hook in a customer so we can win deals. Because we want to win deals because here's X number of dollars that we're trying to achieve, right? So this is where you have to be really thoughtful and mindful of numerically, what are you trying to achieve? And just be able to furnish something. But whatever you furnish, be mindful of the fact that you are not a miracle worker, but you are numerically inclined. So it's an art, right? And it's going to take some time. And this is why I say choose wisely and be very frugal about what you report on.
Another amazing nugget of just like being in this day in and day out, you see exactly what it takes to move the needle and have needle moving ideas. That's a mouthful for me. Needle moving ideas to really help the team get better on the day to day. Because ultimately, you're right. It's like if we can't correlate things to at least a degree to the why now, why us, right, or why this, why now,
Yep.
you you've lost them, right? And unfortunately for reps, a lot of the times we're motivated by only a few different factors. There's a lot that can go into that. I don't want to oversimplify, but if those factors aren't being top or talked about openly, you've almost lost your audience. And with salespeople, unfortunately, with new programs, new trainings, new changes, this, that, and the other, it's like some of those are met with apathy, simply because, like, look, as creatures of habit, we don't want to change the status quo, right? And for managers, it's their job to normalize these things with their reps and say, hey, look, this is where we're moving to, and this is how we get things done. But I love that. Would love to know what you're doing. Last question I have for you. We're halfway through the year, right? What are some of the things that you're looking to really end this year off, um, especially with a bang?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think just generically speaking, this is always a goal that I've had at this time of year, every year for years, is can I source what good looks like? And can we reflect back on learnings from the year? I think at this point in time, we're in September. Most of us might be feeling like, gosh, we just did a lot, but I have no idea what just happened. And oh my goodness, it's almost the end of the year. And then we got to do this again. It's like this continuous cyclical speed race where we don't take the time to reflect and digest. So, depending on people's fiscal years and so forth, I think this is the right time. And I think this should be done a little bit more frequently of taking a step back and thinking about what do I have that I've produced? Sorry, my dog's barking. What have I produced as a team? What can I house for the future? And what did we learn? And so, what I want to do is source what good looks like. I want to celebrate success across the organization. And I want to begin to create more of a repository because time flies. We do a lot of training, we do a lot of enablement, we have a lot of customer conversations, but we lose a lot of content and we lose a lot of gems along the way. So, I think to end the year on a high note, the obvious is the stats from Salesforce like, did we hit our revenue targets? Anyone can report on that. I'll leave it up to the RevOps team to do that. I want to report on something different that people don't know about, right? So that's what I'm looking forward to doing.
It's the second dimension of just a one-dimensional equation that a lot of the times what we focus on, which is, hey, are we hitting our revenue numbers? It's like yes or no. It's that black and white. But I love the thought process you put into this idea of like context and color. Like, what are the wins? What are we doing right? What does good look like? How do we replicate good? And then to tie it back, it's what are the learnings that we had throughout the year that got us to where we're at? Because ultimately we know post this, it's like, hey, we've got a long road ahead of us, right? As teams scale, as companies grow, as all of these things change and happen in real time, you've got to be able to adapt and learn valuable lessons from your past in order to propel your future. So love that. This conversation, I hope everyone gets a chance to listen to. Nieka, it has been an absolute pleasure of mine. We'll wait to see if there are any questions briefly.
I see some in the chat here. Would you like me to call the two out that I see?
Let's do it.
So one of the questions, which is a really good one, how can you scale your subject matter experts? That is not ping them every day. Well, I think if you establish the roles of the subject matter expert, what I've done is a train the trainer. First and foremost, you get them all in a room and you do a train the trainer with them. Do not assume a subject matter expert just because they're good at like speaking about the product. That doesn't mean that they can be a subject matter expert without you telling them what it means to be a subject matter expert for the programs that you're going to run. So step one is you're going to need to run a trainer program just to be like, here's how you conduct this session with your peers. And here's even how you wait to ask for questions or how you defer questions or how you point people to resources, right? Scaling the subject matter expert pool, one thing that I've learned to do is do a SME refresh. So you can do this on a quarterly or biannual basis, but don't assume that your SME pool is just set it and forget it. So if you can agree that there's some sort of SME refresh that you can offer up either quarterly or biannually, at least you are bringing in new SMEs as available. You're doing that train the trainer session again to kind of refresh everyone and kind of see where they're at and see, how is it working and what have you. And you should also make sure that you don't keep your SMEs doing the same content over time because they're also going to burn out. No one wants to talk the same thing ad nauseum over and over again. So to scale that person, you've got to give them a variety for themselves because your programs are offering variety. And you also have to give this opportunity to constantly come back together and regroup. So I think that is a really good way I've seen for scaling the SMEs. And please do not ping them every day, regardless of anything. That is not the right way of using someone else to assist. You only should set up the criteria for them so that they know what the schedule and the agenda is. You should not be saying, hey, are you available next week to? No, set the schedule, set the calendar. Everyone knows who's on third so that it's not like ad hoc random pings at 6 p.m. for tomorrow morning's training at 8 a.m. kind of thing. That's where it kind of fails very quickly. And the second question I see here is how do you get reps to contribute to the learnings of others? That's a pretty broad question, but I would say that, again, using this SME concept really helps because it's a little bit more structured. So at least they kind of know and understand what their role is and what they're supposed to be doing. Give content, ask questions, receive input. So one of the ways that I've done this in the past with larger SME pools is you can have SME specific for delivery of content for learning, and you can have a separate SME pool for teach back or assessment. So if you are asking that same person to do all of those things, it might muddy the experience and the trust in the relationship. So you should be thoughtful about what you want your SMEs to be able to do overall collectively. You should be able to give them some guardrails and understanding of what their role is versus what it is not. And you should give them very specific guidelines and content specific to what they're supposed to be doing so that they don't like have to go off and make this their second job, right? It is your job to make this happen for them. It is their job just to represent the brand. And I think that that really helps to get reps to contribute to the learnings of others, is because they kind of know what they've gotten into, and it's a structured program. If you don't structure it and you don't kind of guide them along the way, they're not going to know. And most likely they're just going to do the basics, which is, I'm supposed to tell you about this stuff today, so here it is, right? So that's not what you really want. So hopefully that answers those questions.
Amazing. Everyone who will wait for another few minutes here to ask any other further questions, but just want to take the time to say thank you, Nieka, for all of the answers, all of the thoughtfulness in your responses. Where can people find you?
So yeah, LinkedIn, Nieka Mamczak. I know it's like a bear of a name, but please find me on LinkedIn. I am more than happy to chat all the things at all times. I love this stuff. I don't know if you can tell. I hope you can tell. I really like this kind of stuff. But I'm learning too. So I like the give get. So please come to me with questions. I'll pepper you back with some of my own. Um, if you're going to the Sales Enablement Soiree in San Francisco next week, I'll be on a panel, shameless plug, but I'll be there. So if you're in the city next week in San Francisco, please find me. I would love to meet. But yeah, let's work on this together. Just because we're at different organizations, that doesn't mean we're so far apart from each other.
I love that. That end remark, of course, just a giver at heart. So thank you so much for everything that you do. I'm super excited, just shamelessly, to connect with you next week at the soiree. So anybody who's looking to go, please sign up. It's free. She's going to be on the panel. Absolutely amazing. And she's also doing some awesome things on the side with women in sales, empowering the next generation of sellers. And was there anything that you wanted to add about that? Because I also think that that mission is absolutely amazing.
I love that you mentioned that. I do think that now more than ever, we are gravitating to LinkedIn a lot more to see thought leadership out there. And I think I'm still in my infancy stages here. There's a lot of us that are, if you're in enablement and you connect with one enablement person, look at everybody else that they're connected to. And just, we are more than happy to accept invites. But then look at organizations. So women in sales everywhere is wise number one. And then women in sales enablement is wise. So I'm double wised. But those are organizations that are nationwide. And again, like, it's not just for women, but there's definitely the Sales Enablement Society, Sales Enablement Pro. There's lots of thought leaders out there that have started writing books. My favorite enablement person, Roderick Jefferson, has Sales Enablement 3.0. It's on Amazon. I highly recommend you invest in his book because he's a true thought leader in this space. But get to know a lot of people. If this is like something that you're new at, or even you just want to look for new ideas, tap into the network, because I have done that. And I got to tell you, this is how I've grown. I didn't learn this by myself. So use the network.
Love it. Anyone who wants to connect with Nieka, please feel free to reach out via LinkedIn or connect with her next week at the event. Just last note from us, want to make sure we're mindful of everyone's time. About Flockjay, a little bit about what we do. We're a community-driven coaching, learning, and collaboration solution that centralizes team wisdom, scales feedback, and gives them actionable resources they need to succeed. My favorite part is I always use analogies. So the way I look at it, sorry, this is the only basketball analogy I'll use on this call, which is rare for me. There's a reason why Kobe goes to MJ to learn about how his footwork, how he did his footwork, what were the steps that he had. And what we like to empower is how can we eliminate the trials and errors of reps as they go about the day to day, which Nieka just presented beautifully about, so that they have the ability to cut down on the amount of time that it takes to really learn the subject and really get in and step a little bit ahead of the competition. It's safe to say that Kobe was a fantastic example of that with everything that he did in terms of his footwork and learnings from Michael Jordan. So all that to say, thank you so much for taking the time. If you want to learn more about Flockjay, feel free to reach out on any of the mediums. Send me a message on LinkedIn. Really excited to connect with you all. But hope you all have an amazing Wednesday and look forward to seeing everybody next week at Dreamforce. And we're done. Thanks so much. Take care. Bye bye.